to the monthly meeting of Southeastern Vermont Audubon. We've been snowed out for the last 2 months, so we're delighted to see all this pent-up desire. And of course, it has nothing to do with the fact that soon, or before the end of the evening, this cage will open and we'll get to see the resident eagle from the Southern Vermont Natural History Museum. We usually start with sort of a little Audubon housekeeping, what our upcoming programs will be. So the April program is Chris Petrak, who many of you may read his column either in the Commons or it used to be in the Reformer. And he's going to be talking about puffins in Maine, going way down east in Maine and seeing puffins. And then in May, it's Mark Michaelis talking about tree identification. And then June is Doug Blodgett, who's a Vermont Fish and Wildlife biologist. And he's been working extensively with Vermont's rattlesnake population, which is primarily in the, Larry, this one here, primarily in the west side of the state. So he's going to be talking about that and also sort of other unusual snakes in Vermont. We have some, or have had some, in our area that he probably also will talk about. But what led us to get him to come was an article I read about him doing research on Vermont's, western Vermont's rattlesnake population. We also do bird gossip, but it doesn't have to be birds. If people are seeing things and wondering why, or not seeing things and wondering why, or just seeing things and they want to share that news with people, now's the time. Anybody?
Male Harris hawk, down by Vermont Yankee.
A Harris? Just recently? A couple days ago. Take a look.
I'm sorry, I meant Harrier.
Harrier, a male Harrier. Well, that's different. Okay, a northern Harrier, down by Vermont Yankee.
I heard about hawk owls that have come down from the Arctic this winter, and I may have seen a couple, but I'm not sure, so maybe tonight that could...
Okay, the only one that I know of in Vermont, and maybe you know more, either of you know more because you hear people who pay attention to Vermont eBird or something, is up in the Waterbury area. Do you know of any others that have been seen in Vermont this winter, Nori?
The
hawk owl?
That's the only one I know.
Yeah.
But it's still there.
Right. It's very, we're way south for it, so it's very unusual. But it's up in the Waterbury Center area.
Okay, well this bird was very unusual. Maybe I can talk to somebody else.
Yep. So, there have been a lot of snowy owls, unfortunately none right in our area. We were lucky 2 or 3 years ago that one was in the cornfield over by the marina. But this year the closest one that I know of, what?
Was at Franklin Farm. It's been reported off and on again all winter, and I have never seen it.
Oh.
I keep looking and I don't see it.
Okay.
So several people recently said they saw it.
Oh, okay. So there you go. Guilford, Franklin Farm in Guilford. That some people say they're seeing one there. Nori saw the one that was down near Deerfield Academy. Other than, and then where was it that the bus, I told you the bus, oh, the Evans Farm on Guilford Center Road. So that's not that far from Franklin Farm, really, as the owl flies. So maybe there is one hanging out down in Guilford, and we all need to be a little more vigilant. Yes?
This is not unusual, but is it because of the weather that we're seeing so many flocks of robins and 40 and 50 of them at the, those little berries?
I don't know why. Do you have thoughts, Nori or Lanny, on why we're seeing so many? Nope, there are big flocks.
Good berry crop or something.
Yeah, lots of,
Apples were really good.
yeah, yeah. And so they're eating apples, crab
That was
apples,
the last few that they.
and
Wasn't that-
a lot of waxwings mixed in with them, or waxwing flocks on their own. But as far as I know, people are only seeing cedar waxwings, not bohemian. And some years, we have an influx of bohemians, but this doesn't seem to be one of those years. Another thing, even though it's been really cold and seems really cold, the time is coming when the bear will be coming out. So sort of be aware of your feeders. Don't feed too long into the spring, because we're not doing bears any favors when we lure them into our yards. Paul?
I think we're going to see these robins around permanently. I think it's another symbol like the Canadian geese. They're forgetting how to migrate these last several years. We've had a lot of these flocks of robins.
Yeah.
And they're eating on sumac right now.
Yeah.
All over wherever you got sumac.
Yeah. And when you drive up and down 91, they're almost a hazard because there's so many in the median flying back and forth across. Huge flocks. Larry?
Bluebirds, anybody seen,
Oh, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
any winter over, or are they?
They usually are, I don't know the numbers offhand, but on the Christmas bird count, we usually have a few. And one of their devices for staying warm is that multiple bluebirds go into a bluebird house and keep one another warm. Plus, they're early returners because they're checking out, nesting sites early. We usually think of warblers in May, and so you just sort of think birds in May or something, but they're back much earlier.
I have three redwings.
That's always, spring really is coming. Red wings have made it to Gilbert.
I saw about 15 along right near the causeway on the rail trail in Hinsdale the other day. And they were conquering away.
Yeah.
I could hear them a long time
Before you could see them, huh? So, before our program, Mike is from the Southern Vermont Natural History Museum, and he brought flyers, which are up here. And that's on Route 9 in Marlboro at Hogback. So it's a good place to check out, because there'll be more than just this, and good displays. Mike Clough is a wildlife rehabilitator. He has, well, you were, but you probably still have your licenses and everything, and you handle them. So do you need special licenses to handle them, or the museum has the licenses?
Either or would work, yeah. In our case, it's the museum. Hi, everybody. In our case, it's the museum is holding the licenses.
Okay.
I do have some licenses still, but these guys are museum licenses.
Okay.
Yeah.
So his program tonight is Symbol of the Sun, Human Cultures, and Birds of Prey. And he says that we're meeting the sun god's falcon, the witch's owl, the varmint hawk, and the symbol of our country. So Mike?
Thank you. How's everybody doing this evening? Good. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Audubon, for having me down here today, or tonight. And how many of you are already familiar with the museum? That's better than I normally get. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we've actually been up on Hogback Mountain since '96. In the collection, we're primarily an old school natural history museum. And the collection is a historic collection put together by a local taxidermist / naturalist, a gentleman named Luman Nelson. We have over 250 species represented in the collection, and they're almost all northeastern species. Over 200 bird species that you actually, a puffin is something we were noticing is missing just the other day. most of the bird species though that we have in the Northeast, you're going to be able to see in that natural history collection. Of course, the Dead Animal Museum is not for everybody. So we have some other exhibits, a pretty good mineralogy exhibit. We're also, of course, we have some of our live animals. Tonight's program is a little different from our standard bird of prey program. I'm sure most of you folks at one point or another have seen a bird of prey program, right? Some of you look at the talons, look at the beak, right? This is a red-tailed hawk. We're going to do some of that if you like. But tonight we're bringing the birds out to talk a little bit more about kind of how we see them and how we have seen them over the years. These animals are pretty compelling. You know, we think back to those earliest hunter-gatherer ancestors. I'm going to be mixing birds in the middle, Holly. If everybody can see okay, if you're all happy with the screen, you'll be able to see the birds better. If we leave. Okay, good? Okay. You know, you think back to those earliest hunter-gatherers. You know, imagine you're out there looking out over the plains. You're hungry because, you know, you're living out in the wild. And maybe you're noticing there's a little herd of antelope down there. Maybe there's a lion up there on that hill. Now there's an eagle sitting over there. All of a sudden that eagle starts doing this. And then it takes off like a shot, like an arrow, all the way across that big meadow. All the way out across, down. You're just barely making out where it's gone. It lands in the grass. The little tussle comes up out of the grass, and it's got a rabbit in its foot. And your stomach growls. You think, well, how did he do that? How did they see that? How did they catch that? If you're looking at those earliest people, we don't really know what they thought, of course. But we look at the birds of prey, and we see these senses these animals have. A red-shouldered hawk has eyesight about 8 times sharper than yours or mine. That bird can spot a mouse at half a mile. An owl can see in the dark well enough to fly through the woods by starlight. And it can hear your heartbeat. Or more importantly, hear a mouse burrowing under the surface of the snow and using its ears reach into that snowbank and catch it. And the thing that those two birds have in common, the hawk, the owl, the eagle, and the falcon, really the feet are the big one. There, that's our natural history. Those powerful feet, those long, sharp claws, those, what do we call them? Talons. Yeah, there we go. Those talons. That's what groups these birds of prey together as raptors, the grabbing predators. We see these birds have caught people's attention 24,000 years ago. They showed up in cave paintings and all over the world. There's an 8,000-year-old painting from the American Southwest, a hawk or an eagle. Carving of an owl from Australia 14,000 years ago. Some sort of little owl idol. We don't even know where that's from. And what did these mean? Why did they paint it? Did they paint it because birds are pretty? They are. Did they draw that owl for some sort of protection from the fearful spirits of the night? We don't know. But as we get into recorded history, as we get where we started writing things down, we do see these animals are gods. The gods in some cases. They're varmints. They're animals that are better dead than alive. And they're the symbols of our country, right? They're animals that have this powerful symbolic imagery. We look back to the ancient Egyptians, and we've all seen this guy, right? Something like that. When these first kind of animal-headed god cults started showing up in Africa, the falcon-headed gods were in charge. Horus, Amun-Ra, the falcon-headed gods were the ones that the Egyptians placed at the top of those pantheons. The bosses, the sun gods, the sky gods, the war gods. I don't know what that, wrong way. They believe that, I just want a picture of a lanner falcon, because lanner falcons are awesome. They believe that those gods were modeled after either the lanner falcon or actually a much less, we might say, imposing bird, the kestrel. Let's see a kestrel. The falcons, of course, are a little bit different from your other hawks. They're built for speed. The kestrel and the lanner falcon actually are very similar birds in some ways. The lantern falcon is kind of like a giant kestrel in the way it's built. These birds are a little more buoyant than other falcons. You think of that peregrine falcon, the fastest animal on earth. That bird drops into a dive, it breaks 200 miles an hour. Incredible speed. Kestrel, though, might hover. Lantern falcon fits in the middle. A very buoyant but very fast falcon. But we look at her, and even this little tiny bird, there's no mistaking her for a robin, is there? This turns up at the bird feeder, you're not going to be thinking you're running out of sunflower seeds. Yeah, right, maybe running out of chickadees, but there's a very striking animal, and you see those dark marks across her face really make her stand out. And there's an intensity to a bird of prey that we don't see in a chicken. A little more of it's that forward-facing gaze, that predatory eye set, right? Now, interestingly enough, the hawks and the falcons and the eagles not only focus straight ahead like we do, but simultaneously they focus to either side. This bird has 3 focus points in its field of view.
Get a little closer over there.
Oh yes, so you guys can see. She's looking out for you folks. So watching these birds, or some of the other falcons pursuing their prey out in the deserts of Africa, impressed somebody a very long time ago. I also would like to mention, I can talk non-stop for an indefinite length of time. We're still waiting to find that cutoff point. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you folks have questions or comments, please, we can go back and forth.
What did you say about the range of the eyesight again?
Yeah, she has, we have one focus point in our field of view. Pretty much what we're pointing our eyes at, right? The hawks, the falcons, and the eagles have 3 focus points in their field of view. So they have the straight ahead 2-dimensional point that we have, and then they have focus point out to either side as well. And kind of, scientists figure that out by looking at the retina, how the density of the cones and rods and everything in the eye. And in between those 2 focus points in the retina, there's a real dense kind of row of cells. So it might, no one really knows, right? But it might be a whole horizon focus point with that real serious binocular vision in the straight ahead.
This matter of seeing a mouse at half a mile, they're not, of course, just seeing that mouse. Their vision of the whole
yes.
is that. And I'm just wondering, that's so overwhelming. If there's any way that we could experience that quality of vision, has the Smithsonian set up a projection?
High-def television, probably. What the gentleman is saying, that when the bird, when that hawk spots the mouse at half a mile, it doesn't have a telescope built into his head. It's not zooming in on that one mouse. It's seeing higher detail than we can see. It's looking out that half a mile, it's spotting that mouse, and it sees the leaf 20 feet away from it, and it sees the flower 50 feet in the other direction. Digital cameras, actually, are a wonderful thing to explain this. They have 8 times the megapixels we have.
What is the color vision like?
Great. Kestrels will see into the ultraviolet. Night vision, not very good. And in most animals, there's a trade-off. Great night vision, you usually have less great color vision.
So they're day
and vice
hunters?
versa. I'm sorry?
They're day hunters?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. More natural history. All right. She's yes, absolutely. The hawks, falcons, and the kestrel's a falcon, and the eagles are diurnal. They're daytime hunters, and most of your owls are nocturnal. I say most because a bird like that hawk owl we were talking about before, snowy owls are very competent during the day. Little burrowing owls down in Florida, they're a daytime owl. But I can't think of a nighttime hawk, falcon, or eagle. Anybody? No? Okay, cool. Yeah, the nighthawks aren't hawks. They're big, crazy-mouthed goat suckers.
What's preventing her from flying away?
What's preventing her from flying away? Two things. One, I physically have a hold of her. These leather straps on her legs are called jesses. And we'll actually talk about them in just a second here. They work like the leash on a dog. But she's also used to this. So she knows she's at work right now. You know, she's on the clock. She's not going to go anywhere.
How old is she?
She's 5 years old, and I will not be able to answer that question accurately for any other bird. This particular bird, you know, all the animals we have at the museum, all live animals, are handicapped in some way, and typically hit by cars. With this bird, she was illegally hand-raised. Someone got a hold of her up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont when she was just a little baby, and the bird became human imprinted. Most of us are pretty familiar with that, right? Like a chicken or a duck is very famous for it. They hatch out of the egg, and within an hour or so, anything big and moving is mom. And if that's a room full of first graders, off they go down the hall chasing those first graders. Many birds, the altricial or the more slowly developing birds, like a parrot or a crow or a kestrel, they imprint later in life. With kestrels, it's about 13 days old. Is when they'll imprint. And she was living in somebody's kitchen. She looked up to figure out who mom was, and she looked at a person. So socially, she's very happy hanging out with us. It's not so much fun for the male kestrel she lives with.
What do you feed her?
Mice, mostly. Yeah, she'll get other things once in a while, but mostly it's mice.
How long will she live?
In captivity, if we just let's turn this off. In captivity, a kestrel can live 12, maybe 13 years, and that's 2 to 3 times longer than she'll live in the wild, assuming she gets through her first year. They have close to a 90% die rate their first year. It's hard, right? It's hard being a little bird, learning how to live. It's even harder if you're a predator. Think about that, right? You know, the
kestrel populations are declining.
Well, yes. And now in Vermont, in particular, we're down about 30% over the last 30 years. There might be a little spike going on up in the Northeast Kingdom because they've started clear cutting a lot up there, which is great if you're a kestrel. Kestrels are open country birds. They don't really like forests very much. And in the last 100 years, we've gone from 80% open farmland to about 80% forest. So kestrel numbers, yeah, have been declining pretty steadily. There's actually, let's just do this stuff. There's they had a study in Pennsylvania where they were actually looking at Cooper's hawks, and they found kind of this surprising thing that there was a disproportionately high number of kestrels being fed to baby Cooper's hawks. And they think what's happening is these fields get smaller and smaller. That forest hawk, that Cooper's hawk, is able to dart out of the woods and grab kestrels, and they're selecting for them, knocking out the competition, really. Now, a great big field, the kestrel's a falcon. The Cooper's hawk can beat her on the sprint, but if she sees him coming, forget about it. She's gone. But as those fields get smaller and more brushy, it's harder for her to do that.
A good place for people to see kestrels is over a field hovering.
Yeah, exactly.
Either going down after mice or grasshoppers or something.
Yeah, and that's a good way to recognize a kestrel if it's hovering, right? There's really no other bird this size that's going to do that. Although they kind of cheat. They fly into the wind at the same speed the wind is blowing. Imagine going the wrong way on an escalator, right? Just kind of hover there. And then also when they're perched somewhere, see how she's wagging her tail all the time? And she'll stop doing it because I pointed it out. Kestrels wag their tail and bob their heads. That's a good way to separate them from other birds this size that you're going to see. All right. So, mentioning the jesses, yeah.
I don't know if there's dove hunting allowed up here, but if there is, you might want to say that she doesn't look like a dove either, because down south where I come from, the kestrels or pigeon hawks don't last long during the season.
Yeah. They've got that same kind of pointed wing look, and yeah, you never know too. Different people do different things. Yeah. Although it's a nice segue into the hunting thing, because about 4,000 years ago, people figured out that instead of using a bow and arrow or a spear, they could use a bird to hunt, and they invented falconry. or training a bird of prey to catch your dinner for you. It was, we hear about it a lot in medieval Europe, which is probably when it was culturally the most significant for a culture, so far as infiltrating really every part of their life, to the point that there were books, the Book of St. Albans, that designated what social classes could handle which birds. There was an account of a priest had left his, I forget what the hawk was, a goshawk, let's say, although I don't know if he's allowed to touch that bird, but it left his hawk in the vestibule of the church, and some thieves had come in and stolen it. They were caught, they had their hand cut off, and they were excommunicated. They took this bird stuff very seriously. And there really were, they would use birds of prey as ransoms. Someone had kidnapped, the Prince of Denmark, and the ransom would be a box of gold, a white gyrfalcon, and 3 trained goshawks. Things like that. These medieval Europe really looked at the birds of prey as a big part of their life, but it did span all of Asia. I don't know how much it got down into Africa, but definitely Europe and Asia. Genghis Khan, yes, you're nodding your head, definitely in Africa historically. Cool. Genghis Khan had hundreds of falcons, hawks, and eagles that he used to hunt. We don't often hear positive things about Genghis Khan, so there you go. And it continues today. We have falconry today, the techniques we use to train these birds, the equipment we use to handle them, it all comes directly from falconry. Out hunting with golden eagles. There's actually ecotourism to go to Tibet and other places in China where you can go and observe people hunting foxes and even wolves with golden eagles. Really neat. And right now, probably some of the Arab princes are spending massive amounts of money buying birds from all over the world. There's people that make a great living helping these oil executives train their falcons. So it's something that's still, we don't see a lot of it, especially here in Vermont. We don't have a lot of falconry, but it's definitely something that's out there. A totally different relationship with birds of prey popped up in New Zealand, and this is just so weird, I have to share it with you all. The Maori people got to New Zealand about the year 1000. And they kind of moved in, and there are all these moas running around. Big, kind of chubby, dopey ostriches. And the Maori started eating them and started cutting down the forests on the island. Within 200 years, they had wiped out the moas, and they pretty much deforested the island. Now, there had been a predator, the Haast's eagle, who hunted moas when the Maori got there. Shortly after the moas disappeared, the Haast's eagle disappeared. Now we're thinking, of course, because we got rid of its food, we got rid of its habitat, right? Just give me an idea of how big. This was a 35-pound eagle. Give me an idea how big that is. This is a Steller sea eagle. For easy math, let's say that's a 17-pound Steller sea eagle. Wingspan going to be around 8 feet. Pretty big bird, right?
Yeah.
So this was twice as big as that. But it probably wasn't built like a Steller sea eagle. It was probably built more like a harpy eagle. And maybe we should, if you mind, just flip those lights off for a second so we can see those toes. Look, feet on that thing. A harpy eagle can hit about 20 pounds. Thank you, sir. Throw those back on if you don't mind. Can get to about 20 pounds. They have feet bigger than my hand. They eat monkeys and sloths. Now let's say you're a gigantic harpy eagle. You're used to eating 6-foot-tall, 2-legged animals who all disappear. The theory is the Haast's eagle started attacking the Maori, started predating on human beings. And of course, that's not allowed. Something comes after people, we come right back at them. But it may be one of the first cases of extinction via self-defense. Fascinating kind of little piece of history. It doesn't really, as far as I know, hasn't recurred anywhere else. Now owls, of course, the night shift, are a little bit different. Not as easy to watch that owl flying out across the savannah. They're a little more secretive. a little more sneaky. The Greeks thought they were very wise. They had a big round head, right? Those forward-facing eyes. Looks very human. They must be very smart. Maybe. A lot of other cultures around the world have very different ideas. Native Americans, many Native American tribes thought they were messengers of death or conveyors to the spirit world. The little screech owl, if you're familiar with the screech owl, cute little guy, doesn't make a bad noise at all. Considered a messenger of death in cultures from Japan to the South American rainforest. Different types of little screech owls. It's almost universal, which is, I don't know, how strange. You know, they kind of have that sinister past, but still they make great marketing. I don't know if you guys can think of some more, we'll throw up there. Can't beat the sorcery thing though. Still associated with witches and wizards. They were listed as a companion of the devil in the Dark Ages. You know, they're loving their hawks and hating their owls at the same time. They are kind of mysterious animals. Let's see one. If I can find my glove. Oh, it's over there. You know, this is probably the owl we're most likely to see here in Vermont. It's a good sized bird. It's very common. It's our most numerous owl in the state. Actually, most numerous owl in the eastern U.S. It's the barred owl. How many of you seen a barred owl before? Yeah, birders. Yeah. Not counting the front page of the Reformer. That's actually the rehabilitators in Vermont. They say it's a bad year for barred owls when they turn up on the front page of the Reformer. You know, really, because this is a bird that's hunting primarily at night. When they're out in the daytime, enough to get their pictures taken and put on the paper, something's not quite right for them. Very often this time of year, we'll get that ice on the snow. You know, that thick crust. You know, I was running back and forth across the crust today. That's terrible for an owl. In the wintertime, this bird is hunting largely with its hearing. Barred owls don't migrate. They get a little nomadic maybe, but they're pretty much staying at home. And when that snow falls, no problem. They just listen. Now we look at him. Don't animals with good hearing have great big bunny ears coming off the side of their head? Yeah, I'm sure some of you folks are already aware of this, but an owl's ear openings are on the side of its head, down underneath the feathers. And what it uses instead of one of these things to get sound into that big ear opening, did I mention it's about 3 times the size of mine? If I was an owl with a skull this big, you could make a fist and put it in my ear hole. You wouldn't have to, it would be kind of gross, but you could. Enormous ear opening, and instead of using a flap of skin, the owl uses its entire face to funnel sound into those ear openings. It works like a parabolic dish, a satellite dish for sound. This bird is able to, if it really wants to, hear a sound as quiet as our hearts beating in this room. Or a mouse at about 50 yards. Running through the leaves, I'm assuming. Now, that hearing goes one step further because those enormous ear openings are crooked. One's higher than the other. You look at his face, and you'll see one side of that face is a little higher than the other. That tells you where the higher ear is. And with those raised ears, the bird's able to triangulate a sound. Basically, this ear thinks the mouse is straight ahead and down. This ear thinks the mouse is kind of just over to the right a little bit. And the owl's brain will kind of draw out those imaginary lines and figure out exactly where that sound is coming from. And that bird can dive into a snowbank and catch a mouse like magic, right? At the same time, we don't see them very much. So it's easy to come up with some interesting stories about them. They make weird noises. Not as weird as a velociraptor, but pretty weird. The people watching TV have no idea what that's about. So, hold still, yeah. So this bird is a good example of maybe a less mysterious owl, because we do get a chance to see them. They're big enough, they don't have to worry quite so much as some of the smaller owls do. Because an owl, in addition to that great hearing and that incredible night vision, they also are very unusual right down to their feathers. Owl feathers are very soft. I actually have an owl wing up here. I think maybe afterwards, if y'all want to check it out, you can. In the darker wing, there's a falcon wing. When you feel it, see if they feel different. They should. I'm going to tell you how they should feel, so it ruins the surprise. But the owl feathers are very, very soft. And that muffles the sound of their flight. When these birds set their wings and glide, it's virtually silent. Yes, sir?
Is that a male or a female?
This is a male.
I
We're
remember
pretty
we
sure.
carried them on our land in Ohio once, and the female was a whole lot bigger.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We have a wild female. We have 2 males that live together at the museum, and we have a wild female that a couple times we've seen her sitting on top of the enclosure, screaming at them. And I mean, she looks like a keg next to them. You know, she's probably about that big.
Our neighbor out there, who was a retired wildlife biologist from Ohio State,
sure,
said that they always said, "Who cooks for you?
Yeah.
Who cooks for you?"
Yep, exactly. That's a great way to recognize the barred owl. That who cooks for you? Exactly. Yeah.
I saw 2 perched together. Is that common?
Recently?
About 5-6 weeks ago.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Up in a hickory.
Yep, you bet. It's breeding season.
Yeah.
You know, are they on eggs?
So it's a
Some
boy
of
and
them
a
might be on eggs already.
They're on the egg.
Gray horned owls can be on chicks right now. Owls start early. You know, they're the first. Owls are the first. Owls and ravens are our first nesters in the Northeast.
Tree nests?
They actually don't build their own nest. Ideally, they're looking for a hollow. You know, a hollow tree underneath a bridge, you know, up in the hayloft of the barn. But some of the larger owls, and the bigger they are, the more likely this is to happen, will take over an abandoned nest, like an old crow or hawk nest. And owls are tough. I mean, pound for pound, I put this guy up against any hawk. You know, owls, they look very cute. But a mouse will never agree with you on that. These guys are powerful predators. I worked at another bird of prey place, and we fed these small rabbits to the different birds. We gave a great horned owl, about a 3-pound great horned owl, this little rabbit. He grabbed that rabbit and flew straight up 8 feet to his perch. We gave a rabbit about the same size to about a 4-pound red-tailed hawk. She hopped to the back of the enclosure and ate it on the ground. Just incredibly strong, great wing loading for that kind of thing. All right, get back on track. Because you guys are like, we don't care about the owl. Show me the eagle. You do care about the owl? Awesome. That's good. So now we'll get sad a little bit. So maybe it's because they're creatures of the devil, who knows, but we definitely have had some bad times with birds of prey. In Europe, there's still quite a number of these birds do get shot and intentionally poisoned. For a long time, from the colonial period here in the US right up until the 1950s, you could get paid a bounty to shoot a hawk or an owl. They were considered varmints. Really, just about any predator you could get paid. Because, of course, they were killing the rabbits we wanted to eat, right? And sometimes they were taking out chickens, things like that. Some of the livestock, especially the larger birds of prey, could definitely eat chickens. Some of them could eat young lambs, things like that. And so there was a real push to get rid of really all the predators. You know, look at wolves and mountain lions, right? That's something, though, that kind of stopped, or mostly around the 1930s we saw most of that disappear. And it was due to an economic study. Money decided. Cornell University was doing a study of some of the farms in upstate New York, and they were looking at the economics of those farms. The 30s, Great Depression economics was a big deal. And they found, kind of without meaning to, they found kind of something a little interesting. That the farms that were shooting predators were ending up losing money at the end of the year. Even though the farms that didn't shoot the predators were losing some chickens and, sheep, things like that. And they couldn't really figure it out until they looked at the books. And somebody's going to guess, right? What were the hawks eating when they weren't eating chickens? Rats, mice, rabbits. And when you took those predators out of the equation, the rats, the mice, and the rabbits, you know one thing they're really good at? Making mice, rats, and rabbits who were in the gardens, they were in the crop fields, they were in the grain bins, They were eating the food the farmers wanted to eat themselves or sell or feed to the chickens. And so when this finding kind of got very well publicized, got passed around, the government started getting rid of those bounties. It's like, we're already paying you for the losses you're taking with these rodents. We're not also going to pay you for the things that could reduce the losses you're taking to these rodents. And really, the 1950s was on there because in Alaska, they were still giving bounties into the 50s. Most of the continental U.S. was done with that by the end of the 1930s. One of the big targets was the good old chicken hawk. Yeah, the chicken hawk. You didn't know that was real, did you? We actually, probably, most of our good-sized hawks were called chicken hawks at one point. Goshawks and Cooper's hawks definitely were. I wouldn't be surprised if red-shouldered hawks get called chicken hawks. But this is kind of our classic chicken hawk. The good old red-tailed hawk. Decorate the red-tailed hawks are another hawk we see a lot of. They do very, very well around us. They love what we do with the place. A highway is great, an industrial park is great, a farm is great. If we'll cut down some trees and leave them someplace to build a nest and promote really anything from grasshoppers to ducks, they're happy to live there. Now, she's a wide, long-winged hawk, short-tailed hawk. She's best at catching things on the ground. She's not as quick and maneuverable. You're not going to see her darting through the forest after blue jays. But she might go into the forest and catch a squirrel. She might go down to the pond and catch a duck. Very versatile bird. Stepping back to that falconry for a second. With birds of prey that are doing falconry, they get to do some things that a wild bird isn't going to bother with. A normal red-tailed hawk is not going to bother trying to catch a duck. A duck is too fast. You're not likely to catch it, and if you don't catch it, there's no calling out for Chinese. I mean, you're done. You're not eating that day. So they focus on the mice and the rats and the rabbits, the snake every now and then. But their falconers use their red tails to really hunt just about anything the bird can handle. By giving that bird some encouragement and a little help, they're able to take on all kinds of different things. And that adaptability in what they eat and also the adaptability in their habitat has made a red-tailed hawk extremely successful. These birds are found all over North America, down into South America. The world's most famous red-tailed hawk lives in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
Right, pale male, which is a great illustration of how attitudes have changed. You're going from a bird that was the chicken hawk, it's your civic duty to shoot it, to a celebrity living on Central Park, right? A bird that has books and movies about it. Same bird, in a different situation. It's kind of interesting, as we look at human beings and our interactions with wildlife, what we think, or true or false that may be, really has a huge impact on everything else out there. We hated hawks, we tried to wipe them out, and the rabbits had a big party. We love hawks now, and they live in the city. It's pretty impressive in a way how we can affect that. Questions? Yeah.
Why is their coloring so varied?
Why is their coloring so varied? I don't know. They're different colors. Part of it could just be there's so many of them over such a wide range of habitats. You'll see the darkest red-tailed hawks are typically out west, but the lightest ones are also out west, so that throws that a little bit. This is a good classic eastern red-tailed hawk. But you will see a variety. We had one near the museum that was blonde. The brown on her head was, it really was blonde. Yes?
There's one in western Massachusetts that's white.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'll see them white.
I've seen photos of it.
And we're thinking albino, right, a lot of us, but they'll actually be leucistic red-tailed hawks. Dark brown eyes, white feathers. Sometimes, I don't know if it's this bird. I've seen a picture of one that was white bird, brown eyes, red tail. Gorgeous hawk.
It lives around I-93. I see photos of it.
Yes.
Is there an energy expended to food return equation for them? I mean, can they? I mean, can they hunt
Yes.
on an empty stomach for?
Oh, can they hunt on an empty stomach?
Yeah, forever? Or I mean, do they have to make an energy equation? Or you said they wouldn't go after that duck because they probably wouldn't get it.
Yes. And I'm not going to be able to tell you what that energy equation is, but there is one.
Yeah.
There absolutely is. Now, that said, the bird can go several days without food. You know, she fills up. She can still go several days, especially in warmer weather. Wintertime, there's a much smaller margin of error. So we'll see a lot of these birds leave because it's just too hard. And I don't know what the equation is, but
there is one.
There is one, absolutely. Yes?
Well, when I first moved to Brattleboro, there were tons of pigeons. And then several hawks moved to the downtown area and practically obliterated them.
I know there was
They're starting to rise again, but they really had a feast for a while.
Well, they have to educate the pigeons. You know, an uneducated pigeon is really easy to catch. There was a giant Cooper's hawk that lived right on the Harmony lot. I know. I saw her a number of times. She was huge. Sorry.
Is this bird injured?
Yes. That end works. She was hit by a car, and you look at her left wing there when she opens them up. Yeah, she doesn't fully extend that left wing. And actually the barred owl was also hit by a car, and I'm sure many of you noticed he has a crushed eye. He also has an injured wing. So, today, birds of prey face a lot of challenges. Habitat loss, of course, is a big deal for the less adaptable members of the group. There are places where they're actively persecuted. One of their biggest problems right now is pollution. The famous one, of course, good old DDT, right? Now, isn't that a great picture? I saw another one, a kid had an ice cream cone in his hand, the same kind of setup. So here we have some essential beach insect control going on. DDT, for you younger kids, probably don't know what that is, but in the 40s and 50s, it was a very popular and very effective pesticide. The problem was not only did it kill the bugs, but it stays in the environment for about 50 years. And it got into the water, it got into the fish, it got into the other birds, and you saw these top predators start to disappear. Pelicans, herons, osprey, peregrine falcons, the bald eagle. A big problem they had was this bug spray. So there was this outcry, and we banned it in the US. We do still ship it around the world though. But we banned it in the US, and everyone went, hooray, and these birds have recovered. There's still a lot of stuff out there. And you're starting to see things like PCBs. Some of the pesticides that are very widely used are turning up in these, people are finding these sick and injured birds, and their blood results are coming back with that. A bald eagle that we were actually supposed to get at the museum, which we ended up not getting, she had been found just they didn't know what was wrong with her. She was just on the ground, starving. They thought maybe she was hadn't figured things out. She was a young bird. So they fattened her back up, got her strong, let her go. A couple weeks later, she was back. Exact same condition. The one thing that did really set off a lot of alarm bells is the bird had just insanely high levels of lead in its body. But they had no evidence that they had eaten any sinkers, x-rays didn't show anything. So they thought that somehow that bird was picking it up from the environment, getting it in the fish it was eating or something like that. And that we're seeing that a lot. Now there's been a lot of, I mentioned fishing, I shouldn't have, because lead sinkers are gone or going. They're being replaced with less toxic sinkers. But there's a lot of stuff like this still getting sprayed out in the world. Sir?
You mentioned the birds recovering. It's only been the last, 10 years that we've actually had bald eagles here in Vermont again.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. Bald eagles. All right, you guys glad to see that picture? Yeah. Bald eagles were wiped out in Vermont. It's only like the mid-90s that we started getting, we cheated. We released a bunch of New York eagles in the Champlain Valley. And then I think it was, did I write it down? No, I'm gonna have to remember it. I think it was like 97 or 98. We had our first nesting pair back in the state. And isn't that crazy? And they just made a very slow increase. Now, I'm sure you folks, you see them out on the retreat meadow, thank you. There's a nest down the river. Actually, I think it fell down, didn't it, in Vernon near the plant?
But they keep rebuilding in just different new
Good,
trees.
good. We have them over, I'm over in Wilmington area, and we have them on the reservoir all year long. There's rumors that there's a nest there somewhere, but it just hasn't been documented yet. But yeah, we're seeing those bald eagles coming back, but it is very recent.
And that's the Townsend Dam.
Right, Townsend Dam has a very visible nest. You can actually see the Townsend Dam nest very well. There's a nest just over the border, the other side of Pownell, so in New York State, that's also real visible. You can see it from the road.
Just across the border into Western Mass, I've been doing some birding. I've seen more bald eagles and juvenile eagles in 3 weeks than I've seen in my life.
Barton's Cove is another great nest.
That isn't there any. I don't know if that's there, but in Hadley, I saw the nesting pair, but they're juveniles and the return is falls. People, there's a Western Mass Facebook page, and you see them every day. It's ridiculous.
It's great.
Yeah.
And it's like I'll be in a school and talking, who's seen a bald eagle? And the kids are all, yay! It's like, wow, I never saw a bald eagle because they just weren't here. And it was largely, well, in Vermont, it was a little more complicated than just DDT. I mean, we were shooting tons of bald eagles too, but there was the DDT, but also in Vermont, we clear cut the state. And they really like those big trees within sight of water. And it's really only the last 20 years that those big white pines have finally popped up above the rest of the canopy. I can actually remember in elementary school learning about the rainforest and the layers of the forest and how the rainforest had an emergent layer. And we didn't have that in Vermont. But we did. We just didn't have it back yet. And now, you look out along the highway and you see those trees popping up above everything else.
And they're not all cell towers.
Right, they're not all cell towers. And actually, probably someone here knows, we won't go there right now. I was curious how many birds are nesting in those cell towers. And is that a good idea? So the bald eagle, we're talking about them, let's see one here. I do want to tell you folks, our eagle came to I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we bring her out. She came to us last May. She was hit by a truck. And actually the trucker who hit her slammed on the brakes, jumped out, stopped traffic, got the state police there and the game wardens there. He stayed on scene until the wildlife rehabilitators arrived. And all I know is they drove an hour to get there. The only reason I bring that up is when I was doing a lot of wildlife rehabilitation, the birds we have at the museum, I've only heard a story like that once, and it was also a trucker. Most often people are driving down the road and go, oh, I saw a bird on the side of the road that had been hit by a car. Or they call and say, oh, I hit a bird at the corner of Main Street. I don't know if it's all right or not. But twice I've heard a story of somebody really going the extra mile, and both times they were truckers. So he was there to make sure that bird went to rehabilitation. She had a head injury, and she had a broken wing. The head injury, the rehabilitators felt had healed up fine. She was recovered from that. The wing did not heal correctly. Now, we've noticed working with her, she does have some balance issues. If we see her leaping off the glove tonight, that's not a balance issue. That's her wanting to jump off the glove tonight. Last fall, we had her in some programs, and she did very well. We gave her the winter off. And this spring, it's been a little slow going. But we're going to bring her out tonight. I brought some chickens, so we're going to bribe her. And we'll see how it goes. She's a beautiful bird. We're not sure how old she is. We think she's probably only around somewhere around 5 years old. Bald eagle gets its full white head and tail right about that age, 4 or 5 years old. She still has some brown, but she actually has, when you compare, this is her, so compare to this picture. She has more brown now than she had last summer when that picture was taken. With many birds, their coloration of their feathers reflects their health. So like the brightest red cardinal, that's the healthiest cardinal. We suspect that getting hit by a truck and wildlife rehabilitation and stuck on a plane, being trained for programs, was not her best year ever. And so she's reflected that in her feathers. Now as she settles in, gets a little more used to this, hopefully this summer she'll get nice and white again. Some bald eagles never get the pure white. I worked with a bald eagle in New York who had been in captivity for 11 years, and he had as much brown on his head as she does. So, without further ado, I would ask you folks, don't jump up and run towards her, okay? All right, okay. Get that chicken ready. Yeah, don't worry, she won't fly around. She's backwards, we're just getting her turned around here. All right. Sorry, a little tight back in there. Are you ready? All right. Now, so, in my bride work.
Yeah.
All right. So while she's eating, we'll bring her up. All right. So when we got this eagle, she came to us and they were calling her a he. She's in about an 11-pound bald eagle. Out in Wyoming, where she's from, they're pretty sure that's a boy. In the bird of prey world, the girls are bigger than the boys. And as you go further south, with many warm-blooded animals, they get smaller. So an 11-pound bald eagle here in Vermont is probably a girl. Pretty good bet it's a female. And we were discussing that with the vet during her health check. He was taking blood at the time. He said, well, we're taking blood. Let's find out. And she is 98% certainty female, based on her DNA. But a beautiful bird. And you look at that beak, that crazy beak tearing that chicken apart. She will go through the leg bones of that chicken if she wants to. And you gonna drop it? Oh yeah, she'll eat the bones and everything if she wants to. She might just throw the bones on the floor for me to clean up. If she knows I've got another one, she probably will.
So why chicken instead of fish?
Why chicken instead of fish? I can't hold on to the fish. She steals it from me and swallows it in one gulp. This keeps her busy. Normally she eats fish and rats, as much fish as we can get her, and the rest of the time it's rats. Bald eagles are technically a fish eagle. They have some great adaptations for fishing, like that crazy beak. Also, the bottoms of their feet, it's like shark skin. They have extra rough scales on the bottom of their feet, or sandpaper, I guess. And fish are probably her, that's definitely what she'd like to eat. But bald eagles in the wild do eat a variety of other prey. I had a guy tell me a story. He's a bird bander out on the Great Lakes, and he'd watch an immature bald eagle fly down a duck. Flew down a duck in the air. The bald eagle book says they can't do that. They're really just impressive birds to see flying around. For those of you who have seen it, you know that. And she's so into that. Do you folks along the aisle? You want to? Oh, there it goes. I'm going to work my way over here to the next chicken wing, just in case. Oh yeah.
Wow.
If her balance improves and if her wing gets better, will you let it go?
Well, unfortunately, the wing won't get better. It's a permanent handicap. She flies down, but not up. Oh. And, her balance thing, it seems to just be, and who knows, really, it just seems to us like she has some balance issues, especially when she gets excited. all right? Look at that. That's you.
Wow.
So why don't we do a few questions, because who knows how long she'll go for this.
What is a bald eagle's vision? We were talking about 8 times for the falcon.
Depending on where you look, because it seems like, I don't know if it's just because it's a bald eagle, I've seen from 3 to 5 times our vision. A bird like a red-tailed hawk, they're the best of the best. That family of hawks, like in Europe there's the common buzzard and the auger buzzard, our red-tailed hawk, the red-shouldered hawk, they're really the best. She's still pretty good. The equation I always hear with eagles is they can see a moving rabbit at 2 miles. I don't know how you measure that, but a lot of times sitting there with the binoculars, I guess. But for a bald eagle also, they're catching a lot of prey. Come on. This is good, sweetie. You all right? Ready?
He's good at his job.
And hang upside down. You snap.
Do you have to trim her beak at all? Does it overgrow?
Yes, actually. In captivity, you end up with kind of some weird problems they don't have in the wild. Seriously. It's coming back out. You gonna let me put this here without biting me? Just take it.
Yeah.
Put your foot on it. Oh, I like that little. Oh, that's nice. Put your foot on it. So.
Well, we are concerned for your safety.
Thank you. Yes. And we were when bald eagles are a different animal than any of these other birds. They have a reputation of having some attitude. We've been very lucky with this bird. She's only even threatened to bite me in the face like 4 times, and never really made a serious effort. Seriously, made a real effort for it. I don't think. Whoops, sorry.
Where'd that chicken go?
I just flicked a little bit of chicken at the front door. Sorry. So, she's eaten. She's seen all of you. She may quit any moment. Any last questions or anything?
Have you heard about the eagles that, I forget where they are, I don't think they're bald eagles, I think they're golden, that have adapted to grabbing like sheep on trails up in the mountains and grabbing them and shooting them off, dropping them to, because they can't pick them up, but they drop them.
Yeah, like mountain goats and things, they knock them off the cliff. Some bald eagles have been seen grabbing turtles, flying up into the air with them and dropping them on the rocks. Which gulls are famous for doing that with shellfish. She's going to talk to you. She's going to jump too.
Does she call?
She squawks, yeah. She makes a lot of noise. You used to see bald eagles a lot in like post office commercials, and there'd be that long scream. That's actually not the sound a bald eagle makes. They make kind of a chicken meets seagull kind of sound. Oh, hold on, folks. There we go. Got a little twisted up there. You ready?
Yeah. How much you weigh?
I'm sorry?
How much you weigh?
How much does she weigh? She weighs about 11 pounds. Which gets heavy out there. I'm actually going to move her back to the box. And she's getting a little tired of us here. And this will make some awful TV, but oh well. No eagles were harmed in the making of this presentation.
No, humans were harmed.
Yeah.
Well, so far.
You can't see anything.
There you go.
Thank you.
She was actually in a pretty awful mood today. That actually went a little bit better than I thought it would. She's a very interesting animal. I've worked with a couple other eagles. Every one of them is totally different, which is a generality you can make about everything. They're all different. All these animals are individuals just like we are, and she's going to be great. We just have to figure out where our middle ground is. But thank you guys for being so nice to her, being quiet and everything. That was great. And any other last questions or anything? We'll let you all get home.
I can miss, where was that she came from?
She came from Wyoming. She was hit by a truck out there. And there's my pretty eagle sunset picture.
Oh, yeah.
You know, birds of prey, like every predator, you know, they play an important role out there in the environment. They help regulate prey populations, who then help regulate their populations. Birds in particular have served as environmental indicators. You know, DDT is bad for us too. And it was disappearing birds that told us that. What is happening to them now? We should probably pay attention. And there was a hand that came up right front, and I talked right over you.
Did you ever get an osprey?
Well, at the museum, we don't really do rehabilitation, at least not on purpose. We're not supposed to be doing rehabilitation. We've gotten 2 birds sent to us, though, in the last couple of years that have ended up being released. And that's through a partnership with Vins, who is supposed to be doing rehabilitation up in Quechee, and our local vet, Ron Speck, who's also a licensed rehabilitator. But right now, we're maxed out. We're kind of half keeping our eyes open for a flighted owl, because we like to do a flight program, like just have all the birds flying. The barred owl will fly into his box, but he's real limited in what he can do. You know, he has limited flight ability. But so far as an osprey, we don't have a live. We have a stuffed osprey. We don't have a live one, and we probably wouldn't actively seek one out. Osprey tend to do really poor. I mean, again, generality, but they tend to do pretty poorly in captivity.
Somebody once bought a condor.
Yeah, Vidor the condor?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was
That's amazing, yeah.
I think it was Bonneville.
Now, you said that you have a male and a female kestrel.
Yes.
Are you hoping that you will have young kestrels?
No, absolutely not. It's illegal in Vermont. I tell them. No, it is actually, Vermont doesn't allow captive breeding. And our 2 kestrels, now remember the female's imprinted. So she thinks she's human. But we had kind of some interesting happen last year. 2 springs ago, we introduced the male to her. And she had been laying eggs just randomly all over the place since she was old enough. So from she was a year old, just lay egg on a perch and in the corner, just laying them around. When he showed up, she laid her eggs in a clutch. She didn't sit on them, but she had them in a little clutch. Last year, she laid her eggs in a clutch and she sat on them. And when she got off, he sat on them. And imprinting that, you know, I associate with humans is not a black and white thing. There are imprinted birds that want to breed with people and other birds and dogs. You know, it's whatever was around at that critical time. So it got us wondering, you know, now are they actually breeding and producing fertile eggs? The first clutch, none of the eggs were fertile. We checked them all, they were not fertile. She laid another clutch that they both were sitting on. Those weren't fertile either. So 9 eggs, none fertile. We're interested to see what happens this year though. We are allowed to let the birds lay eggs and incubate them and kind of have that experience as long as we don't let them hatch. Our red-tailed hawk, actually, I should not be saying this, but no, I can. Our red-tailed hawk lives with a red-shouldered hawk. Different bird. A couple of years, 3 years ago, we caught them mating. It was like walking into teenagers. They both like opposite ends of each other, wouldn't look at each other. It was very funny. But that red tail had a history of laying eggs from before she was actually up at Vin's before she came to us. So that right away got our curiosity up. Thank you guys for coming.
You're welcome.
So we jumped through. This is how we learned what we can let them do, because we went through all back and forth with the state about it. You know, could we let them incubate the eggs as long as we didn't let them hatch? And we missed it the first year. The past 2 years, though, they've produced fertile eggs, and they sit on them and they take care of them. We're hoping to get fertile duck eggs this year and trade in duck eggs and let them hatch sometime. Now, there's some looks of horror out there, but there's actually precedent for this. There was a guy who used to do animals in movies, and he had this golden eagle that laid eggs, and he felt bad for her. that she laid eggs, but she hadn't, and she would sit on them, but they weren't fertile. So he gave her goose eggs, and she hatched those goose eggs. Now, this is a movie guy, so he's filming everything. And he's got this great footage of this giant golden eagle with a little tiny bit of meat in her beak chasing goslings around her enclosure. Because, a baby eagle is stationary. They're like a baby robin. They're helpless. A baby goose is out of the egg and running. And eventually, the eagle trained the geese to come to her for bits of meat. And those little geese were raised as eagles. As they started to get bigger, he got nervous. I guess he'd probably become attached to the geese as well. He got nervous that she was going to eat them. And he pulled them out and released them in a park. And I just wonder, did they go after the other geese? Did they fly in and grab them with their feet?
Talons.
That's right, yeah, their big webbed talons. So we'd like to see, basically if it gives them something, because that whole captivity is not as good as out there. Free food, free vet care, but it's not the same. And what we've seen with the red tail and the red shoulder, I mean, it's fascinating. That male red-shouldered hawk is like, he wants to be super dad. She gets off the eggs, and he's there, and he's on those eggs. And she has to get him beside him and physically shove him off the eggs. Now, when it first happened, I did a little research to see if there was any precedent for this. And there was a birder in Connecticut who had put a picture up online of a hawk she couldn't identify. And the general consensus was a red-tailed, red-shouldered hybrid. And really, it was a perfect blending of the two birds. This past year, I just was, wasting time on the computer. I looked again, and a gentleman out west has published a paper where he has something like 6 or 7 cases of those Buteo hawks, that family of hawks, interbreeding between species. He even had an escaped falconry bird, a European bird, that had bred with, I forget if it was a red tail or a Swainson's hawk, but they're mixing and matching out there. I'm sure many of us have heard of the polar bear, Kodiak bear crosses that have started turning up. And raises some questions. Why is this happening? Has it always been happening? We never noticed. Or are they trying to build a better hawk for this changing world? Yeah. So anyway, thank you all very much.